Hello, I'm Tristram Hooley and I'm giving a lecture on behalf of the Inland Norway University of Applied Sciences. And in this lecture, I'm going to be looking at how we should critically engage with facts and data, and particularly facts and data about the labour market. And this is part of a series that I'm doing looking at the context for career. So there's lots of information out there about the labour market. We can find all sorts of facts and information. But what is not so clear is how much of this is fake news, how much of it is stuff that we should be sceptical of and we should question. How, in other words, do you know what and who to believe when you're learning things about the labour market? And the argument of this lecture is really that you should be sceptical all the time about all the facts and all of the information that you find. Now, being sceptical doesn't mean that you shouldn't believe any of it, but it does mean that you should think carefully and critically about where it's coming from and how that information has been produced. And only once you have thought about those things should you decide whether it's something for you to believe or not. So we're probably familiar with seeing statistics like this. 85% of future jobs don't exist yet. And if this statistic was true, it would have profound implications for the careers, education and career guidance that we were delivering. If we were trying to help people to choose jobs and careers and to make progress into the labour market on this assumption that everything or almost everything, 85% of jobs were going to be changed in 10 years' time, that would be a really fundamental change in our practice. So we need, I think, to look at this statistic a bit more and find out a bit more about where it came from and whether we can really trust it. One of the tools that we've got for doing that is what's called the CRAP test. Now, the CRAP test is just 5 letters which help us to remember how to check information. So it says we should look at the currency, the relevance, the authority, the accuracy, and the purpose of the information. So we're going to do that with that figure about 85% of jobs, new jobs being available. So let's start by Googling that figure and try and find out where it came from. And what I can find out here is that this figure is in use by an awful lot of people. There's a lot of results that are using this figure. It's a very well disseminated statistic. And that can be sometimes a problem because sometimes statistics get passed on, and something that was perhaps reliable and accurate in the way it was originally reported gets slightly changed. So by the time we hear it, we've lost the context. But it also, very helpfully, Google has found me the original source. Now, it's not always as easy to find that source, but here we go, we've got it. So it's a report published by Dell Technologies with a group called the Institute for the Future. So I'm going to download that report and give it a proper read and see what I think of it. And once I've done that, I subject it again to the CRAP test. And so my summary to the CRAP test is here. So is it current? Well, actually, it's not too bad. This is information that's published in 2017. So unless we think the world has changed dramatically since 2017, then we probably think there might be something in here we can trust. Now, if it was in 1917, we might be less trusting of it. Is it relevant? Well, if the information is correct, it would be very relevant to people undertaking career planning. So I think we can say that, yes, this information is relevant to what we're looking at. And what's the authority that this information is based on, this statistic is based on? When I've read the report, there's actually not very much about this statistic in that report. But when you look carefully, you can see that this statistic is actually based on the opinions of 20 experts. And helpfully, this report also lists who those experts are. And I'm not going to go through them all now, but mainly they come from tech companies. And they came up with this figure by talking about it at a one-day workshop. Well, I'm always interested in what experts have to say. I might want perhaps a bit of a broader group of experts, but there's no reason to think that these people were wrong or acting in bad faith. But what we should be sceptical of is the fact that that is the only fact that we're being given. That's the only basis that's being found. This has not been connected to wider literature. It's not based on any kind of detailed analysis of labour market trends and so on. So there are problems with this figure. And I might probably think that 20 experts is probably not enough to make me really feel confident that this is going to be true. Accuracy. Well, there's no obvious way to verify the accuracy of this figure, but the claim that 85% of today's young people will be working in completely new jobs by 2030 is quite difficult to believe when we look at how the labour market has changed in the past. It generally doesn't change that quickly. So in order for this to be true, we'd have to believe that there was something about now that meant that the labour market was going to change quicker than ever. And I probably don't believe that. And then we think about, well, why was this report produced? And obviously that's not clearly set out, but I think it's really been produced to provide Dell with thought leadership in the technological area, which is what their business is about, and some press coverage, and it's certainly succeeded in that. So based on this, I think we should be quite sceptical of that 85% figure and probably not use it or pass it on. But this is the process that we want to go through. So CRAP reminds us to dig a bit deeper when we start to think about the facts and figures that we use to understand the labour market. Now, this is not a new observation. Mark Twain, who himself was looking back to the British Prime Minister Disraeli, he said, figures often beguile me, particularly when I have the arranging of them myself, in which case the remark attributed to Disraeli would often apply with justice and force. There are three kinds of lies, damned lies, and statistics. And I think we have got many reasons to be sceptical of statistics and facts that we're presented. And the fact that I've just taken you through, used the CRAP test on, shows you one of the reasons that often looking at the basis on which these statistics are created can sometimes undermine them. But there are a number of other ways which we can manipulate and misrepresent statistics, and I'm going to show you some of them because I think it's helpful. So the first thing we can do is we can just straight up make up some statistics. 87% of statistics are made up. How are you going to check that? Well, I've just told you it, and so you'll have to believe me. If we want to be a bit more subtle, we might want to dig into the statistics in much the way we did with the previous figure. So I've got a headline here, Facebook sackings double in 1 year. And then I'm going to provide you with some more information that tells us a bit more about that. So that's doubling in 1 year is from 4% to 8%. So it's perhaps not as big numbers as we were thinking about there. And it's based on a survey of companies with 1,000 or more employees. So this is perhaps not relevant to everyone. It's perhaps only relevant to large companies. And it's conducted by an internet security firm who, again, perhaps might have that purpose for telling us this story. And it's all the way back in 2009, so perhaps it's not that current. And the research paper is no longer available online, so the authority is a bit weakened by the fact that I can't even find the information about how it was all done. So if we, so I've got some link there for you, but if we remember the CRAP test, it helps us to analyse these figures and figures that might be entirely correct. When we have all of the information, they start to look a bit different. Now, another thing that can be very common is just presenting different kinds of averages, and this is not bad practice, but it can make figures look very different. So if we look at the two main types of averages people use, the mean and the median. The mean, as this meme shows us, the mean is very attracted to outliers, so it changes a lot if we have some big outliers. So let me show you how that works. So if you imagine 15 people who went to school together, here we've got their hourly wage 10 years later. And what we can see is that there's one person here who's really got a massively higher wage than everybody else. And that person has gone on to be a professional athlete, so they're earning a lot of money. It's not incorrect. And so if we work out the mean, the median, and the mode. So in the mean, we take all of these numbers, we add them up, and we divide them by the number that we've got. And that gives us a really high hourly wage, because that person who's earning this huge salary is dragged the figures right up for everybody else. If we take him out, we get back down to a figure that's more representative of what the majority or the rest of the class had. If we look at the median, which arranges all the figures in order and then takes the middle one, we end up with that figure of $23 an hour. And if we look at the mode, which is what's the most commonly appearing one, we also end up with a figure of 23. So there are different ways to tell them. This is not to say that the mean is always wrong, but generally when we're presenting salary data, wage data, we will use the median for this kind of reason, to take out these outliers. We can also do quite a lot with the way in which we present the data. So if I ask this question, has the number of home workers changed dramatically over recent years in the UK? Well, if I put the figures into Excel, I get something like this, and we'd probably say, well, yeah, there's been a bit of a change there. Now, if I say, well, actually, let's change the axis here. So we'll make the axis run from 10 to 14.5. It looks like a much steeper increase. So we'd say, well, yes, there's been a really big increase in the number of home workers. And if I change the axis again, and I'll put on both home workers and non-home workers, and I'll plot it up to 100, we can see that it looks really flat. Now, all of these are correct use of the data. None of them are poor uses of the data, but some of them are more less representative than others, and it depends what story we want to tell. Now, if we want to get a little bit more sophisticated, my colleague John Boys sent me this excellent example from his blog, and he says, well, have police officers' wages gone up over the last 10 years? And we can see here by this figure that, yeah, it looks like they've pretty much gone up. So gone up from 35,000 to 40,000. But what we can do is recognise that as their wages have gone up, so have the prices of other things. So we need to see whether their pay is keeping up with the cost of living. And that's a process we call indexing. So let's look at it. How have police officers, they're the green, how have their salaries gone up in comparison to managers and senior officials, which is the red one? Well, their salaries seem to have gone up quite a bit more. And the consumer price index, which is one of the tools that we use to look at how much the cost of living is going up, has gone up even more. So in that case, perhaps it's not so much. So if we connect the police officers' salaries to the consumer price index, what we can see is that in real terms, their pay has actually gone down. So while they're earning more money, that money will actually buy them less. So what I'm trying to do is to give you some basic ideas about how we might interpret data and how we might be skeptical of the way data is presented. And really there are three big questions that we always want to ask. In comparison to what, since when, and says who. And these really reinforce what we did in the CRAP test. There's a lot of useful references here, including some statistical literacy guides that I'd really encourage people to look at. But in summary, I think there are indeed lies, downlies, and statistics, and it's important for our profession to be critical and data literate, and we also need to pass these skills on to our clients as part of our practice. So thank you for listening. I hope that was useful, and make sure you're critical of all of these labour market statistics that I'm using in this course, but also other people are using.